We appreciate you being here this afternoon for Health by Design's Urban Planning Scholar Series event, Creating a Bike-Friendly City, Lessons from Portland, and featuring Mia Birk. Health by Design is working directly to create policy, systems, and environmental changes around 4 priority goals: to increase walking, biking, and transit options, to increase neighborhood, city, and regional connectivity, to encourage land use decision-making that promotes public health, and to reduce dependency on automobiles. Without further ado, I will introduce Mia Birk. Today, we are thrilled to have her with us here in Indianapolis to learn from her experiences and words of wisdom. She'll be sharing with us the 10 keys for success in creating bike-friendly communities, both here in Indianapolis, around the state, and even around the Midwest, as I know we have some out-of-state friends with us today. Join me in welcoming Mia Birk.
How many of you have been to Portland? Oh, okay, so you know. Well, now you've heard that it's bike-friendly. You rode a bike when you were there. Did you ride a bike when you were there? Was it pretty good? It's pretty good? Okay, all right, well, so you've heard that it's bike-friendly, though, or you wouldn't be here, I suppose. And all across the world, people say to me, oh, you're from Portland, it's so bike-friendly. You know, we could never be like Portland, never, because it's so, Portland. So Portlandia, those of you who've seen it. But it's a myth that Portland just all of a sudden became bike-friendly. In its early years, Portland was built around the streetcar. And we had streetcar tracks all over the place. Then we got the automobile post-World War II. The streetcar tracks were paved over, ripped out. Freeways and suburbs were built in all directions. And Portland was harmonically in tune with the rest of the country, hitting downhill fast. Neighborhood streets were choking with traffic. Housing prices were declining. Crashes were rising. Fatalities soaring. But this time, the residents revolted. They said, we've had enough, and they formed a group called STOP, which stood for Sensible Transportation Options for People. And they convinced the mayor and then the governor that it would be, to not do this highway at all. And instead, they took the money, and they put it into our first streetcar line, and they turned one of those parking garages into a town square, Pioneer Square. And they took half of, there's highways right next to the river in downtown Portland. And they took half of one of the highways and turned it into Waterfront Park. The regional leaders got together and said, wow, this is phenomenal what's happening in Portland. And so it was kind of the concept of having an MPO or regional government was kind of relatively new then. But the regional leaders got together of all the different suburbs. And they said, they agreed to form what they called an urban growth boundary. And that's the boundary around all the suburbs around Portland and Portland proper. And they said outside of this urban growth boundary, no development can happen. It was really about protecting farmland to a certain extent, as well as to trying to contain the suburban sprawl. So they agreed to that. And then another group drew up plans for expanding the light rail, and another group for expanding green spaces throughout the region. And together, leaders and residents researched and debated, and they grew solid in their mutual understanding that land use, the places that people live and play and work, go hand in hand with transportation. We got our first key to success in place. I'm going to give you 10 keys. Here's one of them. We have a new political champion, City Councilman Earl Blumenauer. So I just tell you, obviously, your mayor, Mayor Ballard, is very supportive of bicycling, and that's one of the critical keys to have in place. We also had a new advocacy group, the Bicycle Transportation Alliance, that was both pushing the government to do more and helping support the government's activities in trying to do more. And so in that you have a second key, I believe, in place, which is the growth of the advocacy group IndyCog, and a number of other groups that we've been talking about all morning that are involved in different ways, and folks that are involved in community bicycle projects, and those that are in the freewheeling, and those that are bike shops, and but community support, community getting really involved. So those two things were going on. So I started hauling a slide projector. I started hauling a bike trailer and 2 slide projectors and a bunch of posters around the city. And I would speak to businesses and neighborhood groups and service clubs like Lions and those kinds of groups and civic organizations, anybody that would have me, basically, anybody that would have me. I'd show up by bike with my trailer and my posters and my slides and my helmet coupons and my surveys. And I would talk about the health impacts of sedentary lifestyles and the increasing problems in air quality and congestion. And I would talk about education and encouragement and enforcement. And most folks thought I was an alien from outer space. And it might be because I would show slides like this that says our first reconnaissance mission to the blue planet indicates that the rectangular creatures in photo 1 are the dominant life forms and feed primarily on the creatures in photo 2. And in 1996, after a couple of years of these wheel and pony shows, plus technical analysis and public debate and internal debate within the city government, City Council adopted our bicycle master plan, the first one, 1996. And this is the third critical key, is that you need a really bold, visionary, comprehensive bicycle plan. And this is what it laid out for Portland as a vision of 630 miles of bikeways. And we haven't achieved that completely. We've done a lot of it, but we haven't achieved all of it. And since then, I've been involved in a lot of, as Kim said, a lot of bike plans all around the country. And it's, but I got to tell you, the first plan that I did with Portland was really there's something so sweet about that first plan. Because it's more than a map of just bikeways. It had everything in it comprehensively, and it had this really strong policy, make the bicycle an integral part of daily life, and it had a complete streets policy in it that was reinforcing the state policy that said every road should have the appropriate treatment, and whenever we rebuild roads, we should do it right the first time, that kind of thing. And the 2,500 people who were involved in my wheel and pony shows really did become the spokespeople for this first wave of bike planning. But we didn't stop just because the plan was adopted. That was just the beginning. That was just the beginning of the revolution. The revolution was underway. So with grant funding and by hook and crook and sweet talk and lots of charm, we started building up a bike program. And this is the fourth key, which is to have well-trained and committed staff, and more than just one. It really needs to be part and parcel of the way that everybody in the department, everybody in city government thinks about bicycling and walking as just part of their job. And this team that I had included some planners, and it had a really key person, which is a city traffic engineer, Rob Birchfield. And part of it is that he rode a bicycle for daily transportation, as well as many people on his team. Maybe not all the time, but at least some of the time. So they really understood bicycling. We learned that you've got to invite people in, and you've got to invite them to embrace this and celebrate every success and include marketing and outreach as part of the work of a public works department. As I talk about in this section of my book called Plant Seeds in a Garden Will Grow, once you build it, people will come. Some people will start using it. And in fact, on the Burnside Bridge, we had almost nobody biking. And then immediately there's 200 people biking. And then the next year there's 400 people biking. The next year there's 500 people. And we could start, and we count. We're counting this, so we're seeing this. So we know that if you build it, people will come, but we've also learned that if you build it and then you tell people about it in ways that are meaningful to their lives, if you encourage them to use it and you make it really fun, they will come in flocks and droves and maybe even stampedes. And so the fifth key, the most successful cities embrace this role as critical to success, and they do it constantly and they do it thoroughly and as part and parcel of the way they do business. And they don't have to do everything themselves, they just work with community partners as well, but they really embrace this role. And there are three specific areas in particular. One is big splashy events, like car-free events, like ciclovias or things like that. Second, personalized travel encouragement programs, also called individualized marketing programs that are very one-on-one to encourage individuals led by other individuals, so they have personal touch. And the third is safe routes to school, which is starting to transform a whole generation, really getting into the younger generation with encouragement and safety education, because you don't just teach the kids, you teach their parents, you teach the entire community around schools, and all three of those programs are extremely effective for very low cost. So I'd like to say this is a unique experience, but it's not. These projects take time, and 10 years is the norm, not the exception for these complex projects, these ones involving a lot of different entities. So the fact that you've done the cultural trail in 6 years is fantastic. And they're tough, and they're complex, and pushback is normal. I've learned now is normal. And the sixth key to success, therefore, is thick skin. After working in a lot of cities, I've come to learn that pushback is normal, and if you don't get any pushback, you probably haven't gone far enough. Because this is deep stuff, and the concept of the bicycle as not only a toy, but as a vital and extremely beneficial means of transportation needs to be aired and discussed and analyzed and confronted. We need to get out there and have this discussion, and there's no need to be afraid of the dialogue. We need to embrace the dialogue. So we took our lashes in Portland over and over, and we kept going, expanding our bikeway network from almost nothing to we included bike lanes, and a lot of these bike boulevards on neighborhood streets, and more paths along waterways and along railroads. And we expanded it to about 300 miles of bikeways in about 15 years. And somebody said to me recently, like, "Why? I read your book, and it kept occurring to me that you never gave up. You just kept going, and you kept having all these controversies, and it was exhausting. I was just tired reading it." How did you keep going? And I just said, well, I mean, giving up wasn't an option. It never was an option, and it's not now, because we're not just fighting for a bike lane here or there, or better bike lanes. This is kind of our newer version in Portland, where we've switched the bike lane to against the curb, and the parking's on the outside, which is it's much more comfortable. But what we're doing is engaging in a larger struggle for a healthier planet for our children and for generations to come. So that's why we're not giving up. With the right combination of top-down leadership and bottom-up willingness to listen and work together to integrate new ways of thinking, we can achieve a lot for very little cost. So this is key number 7, which is institutionalizing bicycling and walking into every facet of transportation. That means our codes and our policies and our maintenance schedules and our programs and our departments, and to the point where it just becomes, this is just the way we do things here in Indianapolis or Chicago or wherever you're doing it. This is just what we do. Just biking and walking is just part of what we do. And we have to be part of the solution, all of us. Because you know what? If we're not part of the solution, we're part of the problem. And this is key number 8, which is take your leaders. You guys go. Take your leaders and go to a bicycle-friendly community, or help fund it if you're not going to go on the trip. But Boulder's a good one, Minneapolis is a good one, and I'd love to host you guys in Portland. That would be super. And joining me in Boulder that day were 5 city councilmen and the councilors, some women, some men, the city manager, the public works director, the parks board chief, and the chief of police, and the lead engineer. And we gathered in the parking lot and rented mountain bikes, and one of the city council women said, "What are these number thingies on the bike?" So, we didn't have a very high level of biking familiarity. And we set off along the bike lanes and trails, and stopping every so often for them to explain what they had done. And just like that, all the opposition melted away. Now, as of about now in Portland, we have something like 18% of people citywide saying that they bicycle regularly, almost 30% in some of the inner neighborhoods. Yes, big numbers, up from like less than 1% 15 years ago. And this chart shows some of the counts that we do on our bridges. So the blue bars are the number of bikeway miles. And the line is counts on 4 downtown bridges of bicycle traffic. And as you can see, bike use has been going way up. Here's some even better news. So now the bars are the bike use. And the little red dots are the number of bicycle motor vehicle related crashes. And so this is the crash rate, plummeting the more we increase bicycle use, getting safer. And at 40 schools where we have started our Safe Routes to School program, we've increased bicycling and walking from about nothing to about 30% or even higher in some of the schools. And one more byproduct is that we've created a $100 million local bike industry with about 1,500 jobs. And it's in all kinds of different things, from retail sales and service to lots of tourism-related activities, lots of bike rides, races, events, and some industry has moved to Portland as well. And we've done all of this for less than 1% of the City of Portland's capital transportation budget. So for about the cost of 1 mile of urban freeway, about $60 million, we've built the 300 miles of bikeways. And this brings us to key number 9, which is document what you're doing. Document it, okay? Count bicyclists and pedestrians and estimate and project usage and measure your success and continually report back. Now, we have all the forms online for the National Bicycle and Pedestrian Documentation Project, which is all about collecting data. So you can use them, and you can have volunteers vested in this, and so I just urge you to really start counting. And we've built a coalition of cities, and I'm really excited to tell you about this because it really is specific to Indianapolis, which is we built a coalition of cities called the Cities for Cycling Project, and that is on the verge of releasing a new urban bikeway design guide. and is affecting federal policies towards, in a positive way, towards sustainable transportation. And I have an announcement, which is that Indianapolis, as of today, is officially part of this coalition of fantastic leading bicycling cities. So very good. Congratulations. It's a huge step in the right direction. It is. So what we've learned is key number 10 is wherever you are, that's where you start. That's where you start. And when you start, keep going. Keep going. And it's not just about the bike, though. It's really about change. And it's not just for cyclists or bicycling advocates. It's really for anyone who wants to change your community or yourself or the world for the better. And continue on with this amazing, beautiful work of creating active communities where bicycling and walking are safe, normal, healthy, and fun daily activities. Thank you.